Have you ever felt that sudden rush of worry when you hear about someone going out for an everyday activity, like a morning jog, and never coming home? It can make your heart feel heavy and leave you wondering how such a normal routine could end in tragedy. That is exactly the feeling that spread across Athens, Georgia, when news broke that 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Hope Riley, was found dead near Lake Herrick in Oconee Forest Park on February 22, 2024. The details were too awful to believe. A promising young woman, a morning jog, a brutal attack leading to blunt force trauma and asphyxiation, and a suspect named José Ibarra, a Venezuelan man who had entered the United States illegally. Her story became known across the nation and even beyond, stirring discussions not only about her tragic death but also about issues of illegal immigration and how the system may have failed to protect her. But in sharing this heartbreaking case, we also hope to remember who Laken was: a bright, active, caring student with a bright future, and to see how a community responded to such a devastating loss. Before we begin, please allow me to say, it takes a lot of time and effort to gather and share these carefully detailed stories. If you find this important and want to stay updated on other events we cover, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. That small action helps us bring you more accounts of real events that can teach us about caution, compassion, and the ways communities come together after tragedy. We appreciate your support because it motivates us to keep exploring stories that matter and to keep memories alive for the people whose lives were cut short in such heartbreaking ways. So if you can, please remember to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future updates on true stories like this. Imagine a morning in Athens, Georgia. The air is fresh. Classes at the University of Georgia, often called UGA, are in full swing, and people are moving around campus. Some are hurrying to lectures or labs. Some are getting coffee, and a few might be out for exercise, taking advantage of the campus's natural beauty. One of those people on that particular day was a 22-year-old named Laken, a nursing student who, although enrolled at Augusta University, was reportedly back on her old stomping grounds at UGA. She used to attend UGA as an undergraduate before switching to Augusta University's program, and she was still comfortable on the UGA campus. It was normal for her to go for a morning run around the university area. People knew her as part of a sorority, Alpha Chi Omega, and remembered her active lifestyle, including her past experience on a cross-country team in high school. She was the type who enjoyed running and had done so countless times without a hint of danger. But on the morning of February 22, 2024, everything changed forever. According to the timeline pieced together by investigators, Laken texted her mother around 8:55 a.m. to say she was about to go for a run, asking if her mother was free to chat. Then, just minutes later, Laken made a call to her mother at 9:03 a.m. We do not know exactly what they talked about, but we do know from official records that the phone call ended before anything seemed wrong. However, at 9:11 a.m., a 911 call was made from Laken's phone, a call that was never completed. It lasted long enough to suggest that in the middle of her run, something went horribly wrong and she tried to reach out for help. By looking at her Garmin watch, investigators learned that her heart stopped beating at about 9:28 a.m. The coroner later confirmed that she died of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. That means she was struck violently, then deprived of oxygen, possibly strangled or smothered. When her mother tried to call back, there was no answer. Laken's friends and family grew worried when she did not respond to messages or return from her jog as expected. By midday, her roommate reported her missing to the UGA police, who took the disappearance very seriously. They began searching. Their efforts led them to Oconee Forest Park, a lush wooded area behind Lake Herrick, which is part of the UGA campus grounds. At 12:38 p.m., just a little over half an hour after receiving the missing person report, the UGA police discovered Laken's body in that wooded area. The news was as crushing as it was terrifying. A murder on campus had not happened at the University of Georgia since 1983. So many people felt that sense of safety crumble all at once. Word spread quickly, not just through Athens but across Georgia and then the rest of the country. Laken was no random name. She was a vibrant young woman with a promising future. Her father was named José Riley. Her mother was Allison Phillips. And she also had 3 siblings who adored her. She had grown up in Marietta, Georgia, and had graduated from River Ridge High School in 2020, where she was on the cross-country team. She maintained that passion for running into her college years. Her friends described her as someone who balanced the demands of being a nursing student with social life, sorority activities, and personal fitness. She was the kind of person who would text her mom about going for a run and then possibly look forward to telling her about how many miles she covered. Naturally, the entire Athens community was horrified. Students at UGA suddenly felt unsafe because it is common to see people jogging around campus at all hours. Many asked how this could happen in broad daylight, near campus trails. Some felt a flash of fear or rethought their habits of going jogging alone. People wanted answers as soon as possible, which led the police to work swiftly, combing the area for any clues. Laken's phone was found, and in examining it, they discovered that the final call was made to 911 at 9:11 a.m. They also recovered her Garmin watch data, which gave them that chilling timestamp of when her heart likely stopped. At first, no one knew who could have attacked her or why. The police described it as a crime of opportunity, meaning it did not seem planned with a particular target in mind, but rather that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time and encountered someone who decided to commit a violent act. The Athens Clarke County coroner concluded that Laken had died from a combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation, implying that she was overpowered. The tragedy of her final moments was clear. She probably fought back, tried to call for help, but was ultimately outmatched by someone who was determined to commit a horrific crime. Days passed, and the shock reverberated not only through the local community but also beyond. People asked if there were cameras, any passers-by, or anything that might lead to a suspect. Then the police announced they had arrested a man named José Antonio Ibarra, a 26-year-old Venezuelan who had been living in Georgia. José Ibarra's background became an immediate focal point because, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, IC, he had entered the United States illegally. He had been caught crossing the border, was later released pending further proceedings, and somehow ended up in Athens. That single fact triggered a nationwide debate about immigration, border policy, and the consequences of letting people remain in the country without stronger monitoring. Laken's death suddenly became more than a local tragedy. It was a national story that fueled arguments on both sides of the political aisle. According to official records, Ibarra had come into the United States near El Paso, Texas, in September 2022. He was apprehended but released, eventually traveled to New York, stayed in a migrant shelter, and then flew to Georgia to join his brother. His brother, authorities alleged, had ties to a Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua and had worked for a short time at UGA. José Ibarra, for his part, had a string of arrests in multiple places, including some in New York and Georgia, related to things like driving without a license, possessing stolen merchandise, and failing to appear in court. ICE admitted that they could have detained him earlier, but local officials released him before a detainer was issued. So, by February 2024, he was still free in Athens, living about a mile from where Laken was killed. When the UGA police identified Ibarra as a suspect, they said it was partially because a jacket with Laken's hair on it was found in a dumpster near his apartment. Surveillance footage showed him throwing away the jacket. Officers also noted that he had red knuckles and scratches on his arms, possibly indicating a recent struggle. That evidence, combined with other details like DNA or phone records, led to his arrest on murder charges. By May 8, 2024, a grand jury indicted Ibarra on 10 charges, including felony murder, malice murder, false imprisonment, kidnapping, aggravated assault with intent to rape, hindering a 911 call, and more. He pleaded not guilty, but bail was denied. The district attorney sought life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, setting the stage for a major trial that the media would follow very closely. Meanwhile, those who knew Laken personally were left in grief. On March 1, 2024, they held her funeral at Woodstock City Church. They buried her at Enon Cemetery in Woodstock, and her family spoke about how they planned to honor her legacy by establishing a foundation called the Laken Hope Riley Foundation. The sorrow was palpable. A father lost his daughter, a mother lost her child, and siblings lost a sister who was known for her sense of humor and her dedication to her dreams. The entire city of Athens held vigils, placed flowers near Lake Herrick, and wrote messages of condolence. Her stepfather said they would miss her every day, but they would find a way to celebrate her life and keep her spirit present. Yet the story also ignited something else, a political firestorm over illegal immigration. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement confirmed that Ibarra was not a U.S. citizen and had been let into the country after crossing the border illegally. Prominent politicians seized on Laken's story, especially since it came during a period of high tension about border security. Some pointed to her case as evidence that the U.S. needed stricter laws or enforcement to ensure that individuals with questionable backgrounds could not slip through the system. Others said the case was being exploited by politicians who wanted to target immigrants in general. The national conversation became heated, drawing parallels to previous high-profile crimes involving people who were in the country illegally. In March 2024, the House of Representatives took a significant step. They passed a piece of legislation called the Laken Riley Act. This bill proposed mandating federal detention for any illegal immigrants arrested for burglary or theft. It would also permit states to sue the federal government if they believed immigration laws were not being enforced. The vote was 251 to 170, with some Democrats crossing party lines to support it. However, it faced opposition in the then Democrat-controlled Senate and never came to a vote. That was not the end of it. The debate continued, and politicians on both sides argued about how to prevent crimes like what happened to Laken. Later, in January 2025, after a new Congress took office, the bill was introduced again and passed with an even stronger margin, eventually becoming the first bill that President Donald Trump signed into law in his second term. This was a remarkable event because it showed how a single crime, the murder of one young woman, could lead to nationwide policy changes. People who were outraged by her death used it to push for legislation that they believed would protect others. Supporters of the bill said it was necessary to keep criminals from slipping through the cracks. Critics said it was a politicized reaction that might go too far in targeting immigrants. Either way, Laken's name was now tied to a national policy debate. Some of her family might have felt that at least her death was not in vain if it led to changes that could save another person. Others might have felt uncomfortable seeing her tragedy turned into a political talking point, especially if they felt politicians were using her story to advance a broader agenda about immigration or border control. As for the trial of the man who was accused of killing her, that would come later. On November 15, 2024, Ibarra went to trial. Instead of a jury trial, he waived that right and opted for a bench trial, meaning the judge, H. Patrick Haggard, would hear the evidence and decide guilt. Prosecutors brought forth DNA evidence, saying Ibarra's DNA was found under Laken's fingernails, and his fingerprint was on her phone. They likely also showed the jacket with her hair that he threw away, and any witness statements about his injuries or his suspicious behavior. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, but the judge did not agree. On November 20, 2024, Judge Haggard found him guilty on all charges, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That verdict might have given some measure of justice to Laken's loved ones, yet it could never bring her back. The heartbreak continued, but at least they knew the man responsible would never again walk free. Still, The events and debates set in motion by her death continued to swirl. President Biden even mentioned her murder during the 2024 State of the Union address, after Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene shouted her name at him, blaming him for border policies that she believed led to Ibarra's release. Donald Trump, who was running for re-election at the time and later won, seized on the story, pointing to it as an example of what he called a broken immigration system. The press covered it extensively, calling it one of the biggest stories of 2024 that combined crime, politics, and the question of how to secure the border. Her parents, Jason Riley and Allison Phillips, were invited to the State of the Union by a Georgia congressman, but they declined, likely not wanting to be in the center of a political storm while still grieving. Reporters drew comparisons to other crimes where young women were killed by men in the country illegally, including the 2018 murder of Molly Tibbetts in Iowa. Some insisted that if immigration laws had been enforced, both Molly and Laken might still be alive. Others pointed out that violent crimes happen in many circumstances, not exclusively by people who entered the country illegally. The debate was emotional and often personal, especially for those who had lost someone. Meanwhile, Laken's family tried to hold on to her memory without letting it be consumed by politics. They focused on building the Laken Hope Riley Foundation, raising money online, and planning how to honor her passion for running, nursing, and caring for others. Athens, a college town known for the University of Georgia's sports teams and lively music scene, felt a shift after the murder. Students became more cautious, especially women who liked to jog around campus trails. They remembered that it had been decades since a murder on campus, even though campus police said it was a crime of opportunity, meaning Ibarra might have randomly chosen her. That did not reduce the fear. More students began running in groups, paying attention to each other's schedules, and making sure to share location data with friends or family if they chose to jog alone. University officials reviewed security measures in Oconee Forest Park, checking if they needed more patrols, better lighting, or cameras. They recognized that while no amount of security can guarantee absolute safety, visible measures might deter a would-be attacker. The funeral for Laken on March 1, 2024, at Woodstock City Church, was a reflection of how many lives she had touched. Her sorority sisters from Alpha Chi Omega came, people from her high school cross-country team, her professors, her neighbors from Marietta, and new friends she had made at Augusta University. They shared stories of how she used to volunteer or help a struggling friend with homework, or how she was always ready to give a pep talk before a race. The simplest memories, her laughter, her text messages to her mom, the way she planned to approach nursing with empathy, hit people the hardest, reminding them that in losing her, they lost the chance to see a caring nurse serving in a hospital, or a potential wife and mother someday. The tears were unstoppable, and some of her friends said they still had trouble processing that she would not walk into a room again. At that funeral, her father and mother spoke briefly, not focusing on the gruesome details of her death, but on the warmth of her life. They promised that the family would carry on a mission in her name, making sure that her love of helping people would live on through the foundation. Her stepfather was quoted as saying they intended to do something significant in her memory, something big and lasting. Outside, after the service, there were hugs and tears, the release of balloons or doves, and a silent consensus that Athens would never be the same. One friend said that Oconee Forest Park, once a place of peace and recreation, would always remind them of Laken now, and not in the way they had hoped. Meanwhile, the accused killer sat in custody, awaiting trial. News outlets printed his mugshot, noting the sorrowful irony that he was from Venezuela, a country many flee due to tough conditions. Some asked whether the system needed to be more careful about releasing people who might pose a threat. ICE acknowledged that they had a chance to detain him after an arrest, but a detainer was never processed or was not in place at the right time. Critics accused local sanctuary policies of allowing him to slip away, while others said the blame lay with a chaotic immigration system. One detail that especially disturbed people was that Ibarra had apparently been arrested in multiple jurisdictions, but was continually released or not effectively held. Whether that was a failure of communication between agencies or a deeper systemic problem, it made Laken's death feel even more preventable. By the time the House of Representatives took up the so-called Laken Riley Act in March 2024, the tragedy had become a rallying cry for those who wanted stricter immigration enforcement. The act specified that any illegal immigrant arrested for burglary or theft must be federally detained, so that states would not have the chance to release them. It would also permit states to sue the federal government if it failed to enforce immigration laws. Opponents of the bill argued that it was a knee-jerk reaction, an emotional exploitation of a young woman's murder to pass far-reaching policies. Supporters insisted it was essential to prevent more tragedies like Laken's. Although the bill initially stalled in the Senate, the conversation did not die. The midterm elections came and went, changing the balance of power. By January 2025, the House passed it again, the Senate amended it, and eventually, President Trump signed it into law on January 29, 2025, making it the first bill he signed in his second term. The entire legislative journey, in a sense, was overshadowed by the memory of Laken's lost life. During that time, news outlets repeatedly featured Laken's story. She joined the unfortunate ranks of other murdered joggers like Molly Tibbetts in Iowa and Karina Vetrano in New York. Andrea Cavalier from The Independent wrote a piece examining the dangers women face when running alone. She noted how these tragedies highlight the reality that a simple, healthy activity like going for a jog can become perilous if a predator is nearby. People began discussing safer running practices, such as carrying personal alarms or running with a buddy, especially in wooded areas. Even though these suggestions are helpful, they also reveal the sad truth that people, especially women, often have to take extra precautions because of random acts of violence. In Athens, classes continued. Life moved on as it always does, but the memory of Laken did not fade. Some students at Augusta University raised funds to help with her memorial. Her Alpha Chi Omega sisters organized tributes. They shared pictures on social media of Laken, smiling and full of life. Meanwhile, the media asked about Ibarra's legal proceedings. Bail was never granted, so he waited in jail for the grand jury's decision, which came on May 8, 2024. He was charged with an array of crimes, from malice murder to hindering a 911 call, the call Laken tried to make at 9:11 a.m., to aggravated assault with intent to rape. The notion that he intended to rape her brought another layer of horror, as if the final moments of her life were even more terrifying than initially understood. Through the summer and fall, the district attorney built the case, collecting every piece of evidence to ensure a conviction. The defense tried to argue the evidence was circumstantial, but the finding of Laken's hair on a jacket he discarded, the scratch marks on his arms, and the phone and DNA evidence painted a damning picture. In mid-November, Ibarra's bench trial took place. Because he waived his right to a jury, the entire proceeding happened in front of Judge H. Patrick Haggard. The prosecution laid out their theory that Ibarra spotted Laken while she was jogging, saw an opportunity, attacked her, and caused her death. The defense could only say that it was possible someone else left that jacket or that the marks could be from something else. But the judge did not buy it. On November 20th, 2024, Ibarra was found guilty of every charge and sentenced to life without parole. That brought a sense of closure to the legal chapter, though the emotional scars remained. Riley's parents spoke briefly after the sentencing, expressing gratitude that justice had been served, but sadness that it could not bring their daughter back. They remained determined to move forward with the Laken Hope Riley Foundation, which they hoped would keep her spirit alive by focusing on some combination of scholarship or support for safer running practices, or perhaps medical missions that resonated with her nursing ambitions. They believed Laken would have wanted to help others, and through this foundation, Her caring nature could continue to do good in the world. Friends said that the foundation might also partner with efforts to raise awareness of campus safety, as no one wanted another person to die the way Laken did. The political world, however, did not let the discussion of the murder fade. Some Republicans, like Senator Lindsey Graham, stated that Riley's killing changed the tone of the 2024 election, as it reminded voters of the real consequences of illegal immigration. Democrats replied that her case was being politicized unfairly, and that heartbreak should not be used for dangerous political games. The friction was real, but it also highlighted how a single event could become a flashpoint for major issues. In an even more dramatic twist, Laken's name was mentioned by President Joe Biden during the State of the Union address, after Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, known for her outspoken style, shouted out Laken's name. The family apparently declined to attend the State of the Union as guests of a Georgia congressman, possibly not wanting to put themselves in the middle of a partisan debate. Throughout it all, the memory of Laken as a person never left the hearts of her loved ones. They recalled her optimism about finishing nursing school, her dedication to sports and staying fit, and how she had genuinely cared about others. She had a big heart that was excited about life. She was a daughter, a friend, and a role model for her younger siblings. That is who she was. Not just a victim of a violent crime or a symbol for any political cause. Sometimes families express a desire to keep the victim's memory about who they were rather than what was done to them. They want the world to remember the good times, the laughter, and the potential she had for a bright future. Meanwhile, the University of Georgia tried to respond in a meaningful way. They recognized that their campus, known for its academic excellence, sports achievements, and sense of community, had been violated by a crime that had not occurred there in decades. Students demanded better safety measures, especially along jogging trails. The university might have increased patrols, installed emergency call boxes or better lighting, and encouraged students to use phone apps that let friends track their runs. Athletes who used the same park for training felt a chill at the thought that Laken was murdered there. The older generation recalled the last murder on campus from 1983, but for the younger crowd, that was ancient history. So they felt this event break a sense of security they had always taken for granted. Media coverage included opinions on the broader meaning of Laken's murder. Some articles explored the rising fear among women who run alone, linking it to other high-profile runner murders. Others zeroed in on the immigration angle, referencing the historic surge in border crossings during Biden's tenure as context. Forbes writer Sarah Dorn labeled it a national political case, underlining how it became a staple talking point for politicians addressing border policies. The White House and both parties in Congress had to react, and that reaction eventually shaped the final form of the Laken Riley Act, which was debated, stalled, then revived, amended, and passed. For better or worse, her tragedy influenced major legal changes, reflecting the fact that stories like hers can move hearts and shift votes. Eventually, January 2025 arrived, and a new Congress took office. The House was eager to pass immigration-related bills again. Among the first items was the Laken Riley Act, which once more found enough supporters to pass, and this time with even more votes. When it moved to the Senate, some changes were made, possibly to address concerns from moderate Democrats. After a bit of back and forth, the Senate passed it on January 20th, 2025, and by January 29th, President Trump signed it into law. The entire sequence was heavily covered by news outlets, which repeated Laken's story in every summary of the legislative process. For her family, it might have been bittersweet, though they lost her. Part of her legacy was that the law might keep others from being harmed. Some families of past victims who had died at the hands of illegal immigrants attended the signing ceremony, but it is not confirmed if Laken's family did. They might have chosen to grieve privately or to focus on their foundation instead of standing in the political spotlight. As time moved forward, People began to place her story alongside other tragic incidents that shaped public policy. Yet among her friends and community, Laken remained a real person, not a symbol. They told stories of how she used to stay up late studying with them in the dorm lounge, or how she once organized a small fun run for charity. They missed her sense of humor, her determination to be a nurse, her way of lighting up a conversation. The crime of opportunity that took her life served as a harsh reminder that even a short, routine jog could be fraught with danger if one unlucky encounter happens. People who read or heard about it started to think, could that have been me or someone I love? The final word came from the trial itself. On November 20th, 2024, when Judge H. Patrick Haggard found Ibarra guilty of all charges and sentenced him to life without parole. The fundamental question for many was, why did it have to happen in the first place? The heavier sentence did not quell the pain of losing Laken, but it did ensure that the man who ended her life would never have a chance to do so again. Some might say justice was served. Others lamented that true justice would only be bringing her back, which is impossible. The community found some closure, but the memories and the sense of vulnerability remain. Today, if you visit Athens or the University of Georgia campus, you might see a plaque or a memorial near Lake Herrick, placed in her memory. The local running groups might take a moment of silence before big events, dedicating a run to her name. Her friends might have pictures of her displayed in their homes, or a page in their sorority scrapbook. Meanwhile, the debate about illegal immigration continues, with some pointing to her story as one among many reasons to tighten border policies, and others cautioning about scapegoating. Yet, in the end, the only thing we know for sure is that a bright young student named Laken lost her life far too soon, leaving behind a family who must navigate their grief each and every day. As we reach the end of this detailed account, I hope you have gained a deep understanding of what happened to Laken, how her killing triggered discussions on campus safety, immigration, and justice, and how her memory has been honored. It is never easy to talk about such a painful event, but by doing so, we keep her spirit alive, learn important lessons about caution, and perhaps push for changes that might prevent future tragedies. If you found value in this retelling and want to continue exploring real-life stories that shape our communities, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support is what allows us to research, compile facts, and share them with empathy. We owe it to individuals like Laken to make sure their stories are not forgotten, that their lives are celebrated for who they were, and that any lessons we can glean from their tragic departures